Championship Drag Racing from the NHRA. As the superstars of Top Fuel came to Gainesville Raceway in the Gator Nationals, Bernstein held a slight lead over Pat Austin in the Winston points chase. Joe Amato, Doug Herbert, Mike Brotherton, third, fourth, and fifth, respectively, after 3 races. Pat Austin got a big break in the first round when he was matched up against Doug Herbert. The Hugger Sportswear car was in the lane nearest the camera. The Castrol car of Pat Austin, the Austin family, in the far lane. Problems for Pat Austin occurred at the start, but the bigger problem was Doug Herbert's a red light. It's hard to believe, but he never saw it.
Well, I looked up and saw the wind light. I didn't know when I left line. I saw the red. It was probably, or I saw the green or the yellow light. It must have been pretty close, but.
Well, the car moved awfully hard. I almost hate to tell you this, a 487 on the red light run.
That's the way it goes. Drag. That's why they call it drag racing.
That's what they all say.
487, the quickest elapsed time ever for Doug Herbert. Mike Dunn got a break as well. He was facing Joe Amato in round number 1 at the Gator Nationals. Dunn in the Jack Clarkone car was in the far lane. The Valvoline car of Amato in the near lane. You were on board. Problems for Amato and the victory for Mike Dunn, 496 at 288 miles an hour. The damage was extensive on the engine in Amato's car. The disappointment that showed on Joe Amato's face after that first round loss spoke volumes. Another big runner bit the dust in round number 1. Don Prudhomme at the wheel of the Skull Bandit came to the starting line to face Kim LaHaye. Driving the car owned by Larry Frazier on the far side, LaHaye left the starting line just a few thousandths of a second slower than Prudhomme. But she made up a lot of the difference by the time they reached the mid-track at the finish line. 496 for LaHaye, 497 for Prudhomme. Kim's 496 gave her lane choice over Scott Coletta in the second round, while Eddie Hill got to pick his lane over Pat Austin. Kenny Bernstein selected the lane over Tommy Johnson Jr., and Mike Dunn had his choice of lanes over Mike Brotherton in round number 2, where Kim LaHaye continued her fantasy journey through Top Fuel Eliminator. Scott Coletta was the victim this time, and she was obviously happy with a 5:01 victory at over 278 miles an hour. Mike Brotherton at the wheel of Darrell Gwynn's car got a giant break when Mike Dunn smoked the tires off the starting line. Then it was Kenny Bernstein in the Budweiser King car in the far lane, trying to back up his new speed record of 301.70 miles an hour. We took a ride with him. He crossed the finish line well ahead of Tommy Johnson Jr. His speed of over 299 gave him the record at 301.70. Still in the second round of Top Fuel Eliminator, Eddie Hill was in the far lane in the Pennzoil dragster against the Castrol car of Pat Austin. Youth versus experience. Eddie Hill blasted off the starting line first and drove away from Pat Austin's 497 to the quickest elapsed time in the history of drag racing, 4.80 seconds at over 291 miles an hour. That history-making run set up the race. In the semifinals, Eddie Hill against Kim LaHaye, Kenny Bernstein versus Mike Brotherton. Semifinal action coming up next. That is the quickest dragster driver in history. Eddie Hill, 56 years old. He's getting suited up for his race coming up just a little bit with Kim LaHaye. Right now, we're riding on board the Budweiser King of Kenny Bernstein, and what a ride it is. This car, the fastest in the world today at 301.70 miles an hour. He has backed it up within the required 1%. That is the new national record. His competition in this race is the car owned by Darrell Gwynn. Darrell himself, the winner here at Gainesville in 1989 and 1990. Now Mike Brotherton behind the wheel with that man, Ken Vini, serving as his crew chief. The Coors Light Silver Bullet aced out a 491 in the second round, but didn't even get the lane choice because Bernstein, behind the tune-up of Dale Armstrong, ran a 487 at over 299 miles an hour. While Bernstein may hold the lane choice we have found throughout this event thus far, it doesn't make a bit of difference. And a giant wheel stand for Bernstein, and up in smoke is Brotherton. Bernstein puts it back to the pavement, runs a 5:57 at 263 miles an hour, but he's got problems. Look at the right front wheel. It is crumpled under. When the front end came down, it hit hard enough to break the front end on the race car. What an incredible job by Kenny Bernstein. As he left the starting line, the front end came up. Then it slammed back down to the pavement, breaking the front end. And look at that. Under power is Bernstein. He was determined to get to the finish line and win the round. We rode with him on this wild ride, up, 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 and almost away. But Kenny Bernstein was able to keep it between the guardrail and the center line. He ran 263 miles an hour with the right front wheel crumpled under. Picking up after her long burnout, a lady that is living a dream, Kim LaHaye, here in round number 2, racing against the quickest dragster driver of them all, Eddie Hill. That is her car owner, Larry Frazier, coming over to inspect the 5,000 horsepower engine sitting behind Kim LaHaye. You're looking down in the cockpit as Eddie Hill gets ready with a Pennzoil dragster to try for yet another 480 elapsed time on the NHRA Winston Championship Circuit. Kim LaHaye taking advantage of not only great performance, her first ever 4-second run, but a great reaction time to beat Don Prudhomme in the first round. Here she loses a motor right off the line, and Eddie Hill goes into the final round. His elapsed time, 4:84. That satisfies the rules requirement for a 1% backup run, giving Eddie Hill the record at 4.80 seconds. Absolutely ballistic times out of the nuclear banana. You see the problems that Kim LaHaye had, a pop out of the engine, that put her out of competition. But she proved today that she can run with the best of them. As the racers came to Gainesville in the Motorcraft Gator Nationals, the lead in the Winston point standings in Pro Stock was held by Jerry Ekman, a substantial margin over Jim Yates, Bruce Allen, Mark Powick, and Warren Johnson. In round number 1, it was a rematch of round 2 at Houston 2 weeks ago, when Bob Glidden in the Motorcraft Ford Pro was challenged by Mark Powick. This was a rematch of a second round confrontation in Houston between Glidden and Powick. Powick there went on to win the event title, but he beat Glidden by 1,000th of a second. Here in the first round, a slight advantage off the starting line by Glidden was not enough to overcome the horsepower of the Oldsmobile, and again, by 1,000th of a second, Mark Powick took the victory over Bob Glidden. Joe Lapone Jr. had a first-round confrontation with the Winston points leader, Jerry Ekman. The driver of the Summit Racing Chevy Beretta was in the far lane, while the Pennzoil Pontiac of Ekman occupied the near lane. The advantage off the starting line went to Jerry Ekman, and he needed every bit of it. The bright yellow Pontiac moved around a bit in first and second gear, giving a break to Lapone, but he could not take advantage of it. Ekman won the race 7:20. Lapone's losing time was 7:19. Jerry described his run. That next round put Jerry Ekman against Lewis Wharton Chevrolet, while Mark Powick got the opportunity to challenge the quickest pro stocker ever, Scott Jeffrion. While Larry Morgan picked his lane over Bruce Allen Chevy, and Warren Johnson battled Vince Curry in the Battle of Oldsmobile. Ekman and Wharton, Lewis Wharton in the near lane in a Chevy Beretta, tried to hold off the Pennzoil Pontiac, but found that more difficult to do than to talk about. Ekman, 7.15 seconds, the quickest time ever for Wharton at a 7:19. For the fourth time this season, Jerry Ekman advanced to the Final Four, adding even more to his Winston points total. Larry Morgan's Oldsmobile from Castrol GTX was in the near lane. The Super Shop Chevy Beretta of Bruce Allen was moving around in the far lane, and that allowed Larry Morgan to slip by for the victory. Allen had the quicker elapsed time at 7.20, but there you see the numbers. It was Larry Morgan, 7:21 and 191, that advanced him another round at the Gator Nationals. The second round saw the most recent winner, Mark Powick, up against the quickest car in history, Scott Jeffreyon. The Freightliner Oldsmobile of Powick, the Mopar Parts Dodge Daytona of Jeffreyon, and we were on board. It was a slight advantage off the starting line for Powick, and that was enough to give him the victory as Jeffreyon slowed to a 7:19. That's the time of Mark Powick. That advanced him another round. Looking very strong in the Winston points chase is Mark Powick. It was a brace of Oldsmobiles, the final pair of round number 2 of Pro Stock. In the far lane was Vince Curry. In the near lane, the AC Delco car of Warren Johnson. The advantage off the starting line by 0.04 of a second went to Curry, but the power of WJ, 7:14, his third run of the weekend at over 194 miles an hour. That victory set up our semifinals, which finds Warren Johnson getting to pick his lane over longtime nemesis Larry Morgan, while Jerry Ekman selects his lane over Mark Powick. That racing coming up next.
Olympic report on the hour.
They stripped the body panels off the Budweiser King, driven by Kenny Bernstein. Crew Chief Dale Armstrong, you're looking at him inspecting the damage. He says he thinks they can make it for the finals against Eddie Hill here at the Gator Nationals. I'm Dave McClelland along with Steve Evans, and we're into the semifinal round of Pro Stock Eliminator here at the quickest, fastest racetrack in the world. This is Gainesville Raceway. In the far lane, the Pennzoil Pontiac driven by Jerry Ekman. He is the Winston points leader, winning 2 of 3 races already this season. His opponent in the near lane, the Freightliner Oldsmobile, driven by the most recent winner on the circuit, Mark Powick. He picked up the victory down at Houston using the tune-up by that tall dude standing right next to that low-slung Oldsmobile. That's his crew chief, Dave Butner. You could be looking at the Winston champion, but of course there's a lot of races yet to go before this season is over. A total of 14, in fact. Mark Powick has been driving exceptionally well, defeating the likes of Bob Glidden, 10-time Winston champion. Nobody doubts the ability of Jerry Ekman. He finished 3rd in the world in the Winston Chase back in 1990, along with his car owner, Bill Orndorff, and the assistance of Dale Icke. They've got the performance to go along with Ekman's driving skills. Now you see the Christmas tree. The drivers pull forward into infrared beams stretched across the starting line. The top light comes on the tree. That indicates they are very close to being at the actual starting line. They roll forward about another 6 inches. They light the second bulb on the top of the tree. That indicates the starter buster counts. They're ready. He can throw the switch anytime in a red light for Mark Powick. You live by the sword, you die by the sword. Jerry Ekman advances to the final round with a 7:18 elapsed time at 192 miles an hour. Mark Powick was only 9 thousandths of a second too quick off the line, but it cost him the race when he got the red light. Here is Warren Johnson. His performance this weekend has been absolutely incredible. Throughout eliminations, he has run times in the 7:14 range. His opponent, Larry Morgan, changed engines. Steve Evans stopped by the pits and found out the details.
A lot of work in the Larry Morgan pit area. After a disappointing 7:21 in round number 2, the engine he calls Mr. Ed has gone back to the barn, and he's now installing Wilbur. Now, he didn't have all that much confidence in Wilbur earlier on, but now he says even 2 or 3 horsepower could make a big difference. They'll get it ready, be in the lanes in plenty of time.
Every bit of horsepower may be necessary for Larry Morgan to seriously challenge Warren Johnson. Listen to the times. 7:14 in the first round when he beat Ricky Smith. 7:14 in the second round when he beat Vince Curry. Now all he has to do is run quicker than a 7:13, and he will pick up a new national record currently held by Scott Jeffreyon. WJ, the AC Delco Oldsmobile in the near lane. The 500 cubic inch Oldsmobile of Larry Morgan, the Castrol car owned by Bob Piniella, staging so carefully in the far lane. They're set. A nearly identical start. Warren Johnson's top-end horsepower pays off, and believe it or not, another 7:14. This time at a speed of over 193 miles an hour. Back in the Kenny Bernstein pit area. That's Kenny's Winston Cup driver, Brett Bodine, helping out on the repairs on the Budweiser King. Looks like the front end is repaired. Now they're concentrating on the engine component. Getting it dialed in for the race against Eddie Hill in the Top Fuel final. By virtue of his victory 2 weeks ago at Houston and the new national record, it's Cruz Pedregon holding the lead as the funny car racers started racing in round number 1 here at Gainesville. The Florida fans had a home state hero to cheer for in round number 1 after Al Hoffman had qualified his lower drive service Dodge Daytona in the number 2 spot. In the first round of competition, he faced Gary Bolger at the wheel of the Dale Creasy car. Helen Hoffman, Al's wife, tried to will him to victory, but it was not to be. As Gary Bolger ran the quickest elapsed time of his career, Hoffman went up in smoke. Bolger crossed the finish line with an incredible 5:23 at 2:75.
Talk about a shot out of nowhere. Gary Bolger, hang on to your sock there. 5:23.
All right. I love it. I love it.
Career best is an underestimate.
Oh, yes, definitely.
Two young drivers met in round number 1. Richard Hartman against Whit Bazemore. Bazemore at the wheel of the Permatex Pro blasted out his personal best, 5:26 and 2:83 to advance to round number 2.
Whit, your 5:26 gives you lane choice over the reigning Winston champion John Force.
Boy, that's something, isn't it, Steve? I tell you what, my Fast Orange crew, they've done such a good job with this Ford Probe. Can't wait to race Force. Maybe we can be competitive against him this time, huh?
Sure sounds like it.
The second round pairings found Bazemore against Force, while Cruz Pedregon was set to race Chuck Etchell. The other side of the ladder, Gary Bolger had his pick of lanes over Mark Oswald, and Paul Smith got to choose the lane over Jim Epler. You're on board the Castrol Oldsmobile of John Force as he faced Whit Bazemore in the Permatex Pro. Whit made a race of it until the last few feet of the quarter mile when John Force streaked to a 5:21 at over 287 miles an hour. Cruz Pedregon got the lane choice when he defeated Chuck Etchels with a giant hole shot. He had a 5:21. Etchels ran low ET of eliminations thus far at a 5:17 and lost. In round number 2 racing, it was Mark Oswald in the Petosa Brothers Dodge, the underdog to Gary Bolger. Oswald smoked the tires. Bolger had problems and shut off, but he advanced into the final 4 with that victory, the furthest that Bolger has run all season long. As he climbed from the car, he had to feel he's the luckiest man in America today. The Winter Nationals champion, Jim Epler, used a brilliant 5.20 at 279 to handily put away Paul Smith. That set up the semifinals, which finds Epler picking the lane over Gary Bolger, and Cruz Pedregon selects his lane over John Force. You're riding on board with John Force, the 2-time Winston champion, performing extremely well here. Not only is he running quick, but he is also running very consistently. He'll need every bit of it, though, because here is the quickest funny car in the world. This is the McDonald's Oldsmobile, owned by Larry Miner and driven 2 weeks ago by Cruz Pedregon to the quickest elapsed time ever for a flopper, 5.10 seconds. John Force remembers that race, particularly the ability of Cruz Pedregon to leave the starting line ahead of the Winston champ. John's trying to do something about it. Steve, if practice makes perfect, then the rest of the funny car world ought to look out, because John Force, with those 2 Winston victories to his credit and dedicated to making it 3 in a row, is going to be tough to beat. How quick is he? We'll find out in a moment as he comes up against one of the best. It's the Castrol car of John Force carrying the big number 1. You saw his crew chief, Austin Coyle, giving the signal as to how to leave the line. Pedregon in the far lane, with his crew chief, Bernie Federley, doing such an outstanding job getting this car down to record-shattering performance levels. The last to stage, Force. He's in the beam. Pedregon accelerates off the line first and then goes up in smoke. John Force across the finish line in the victory and into the finals, 5.20. His speed 286 miles an hour. His reaction time, 0.445. Cruz Pedregon, 0.426. Pedregon beat him again off the line. Here's the Black Diamond Entertainment Group Dodge Daytona, Jim Epler at the wheel. The long, smoky burnout designed to heat those huge 17-inch wide tires up to optimum temperature to grab a hold of the concrete starting line and then the asphalt that makes up the racing surface of 1,320 feet here at Gainesville Raceway. This is the body coming down on the upset-minded Tyrant car driven by Gary Bolger. Dale Creasy, the car owner, and Creasy is the crew chief on this entry as well. Gary Bolger, the question on everyone's mind, can he challenge Jim Epler? Epler had a much quicker time in the second round, 5:20, when he put away Paul Smith. Gary Bolger running 6:03 on a trouble-plagued run. The Dodge Daytona of Epler staging in the near lane. Both drivers creeping into those beams to start, all important. Epler from behind, his time 5.22 seconds, his speed 270 miles an hour. Bolger got the whole shot that he wanted, but the car just would not run the number he needed to win the race. Let's watch in replay. Look at Bolger in the far lane, almost 0.03 of a second advantage off the starting line. He held the lead for a long way down the track until Epler and the Dodge began to make the power necessary to come from behind and eke out a very narrow victory. Jim Epler into the finals. The final race of the 23rd Annual Motorcraft Gatornationals is on the line. It is the fastest drag crew in the world against the quickest. This day has been Eddie Hill's thus far. In eliminations, he has not run slower than 4.89 seconds. He has recorded a 4.80 elapsed time, the quickest ever, and backed it up within the required 1%. That's the rule by NHRA, and Eddie Hill lived up to it. He's got the record at 4.80. For Kenny Bernstein, he has the honor of being the fastest man in the world on a quarter-mile drag strip, 301.70 miles an hour. But the important thing is his crew got the car back together and he is ready for this final round race. The right front wheel that was bent when it came back to earth after the wheel stand in the semifinals against Mike Brotherton is repaired and Bernstein is ready. His crew chief Dale Armstrong, along with Wes Cerny, who joined the team this year. Battle of wits between them and Fuzzy Carter, the crew chief for Eddie Hill. Fuzzy making the final adjustments on the 5,000 horsepower engine that sits right behind Eddie Hill. They have got a combination that is working well on this racetrack. Remember, this car is not a state-of-the-art entry. It is much shorter than the car driven by Kenny Bernstein, and today it seems to be paying off. The final staging procedure of the last race. And Bernstein goes up in smoke. Eddie Hill across the finish line, and the celebration begins. The time, 4.84 seconds at 290 miles an hour. And if we get a chance to watch again an instant replay, I direct your attention to the car in the far lane. Eddie Hill moves first. He left the starting line ahead of one of the best levers in the sport. Kenny Bernstein smoked the tires. Once you lose the traction, you're out of contention. This victory by Eddie Hill, his first since October of 1988. Absolutely right, and if you'll take a look at Eddie Hill, I think we know where his crew learned how to do that starting line dance. This dominating victory by Hill moved him into fifth in the Winston standings. Kenny Bernstein first, Pat Austin remains second, Joe Amato third, Mike Brotherton in fourth. In funny car, John Force has moved ahead of Cruz Pedregon, Jim Epler to third, Tom Hoover fourth, and Richard Hartman number 5. Jerry Ekman maintains his lead in Pro Stock, but Warren Johnson coming on strong. Mark Powick is third, Bruce Allen fourth, and Scott Jeffrey on fifth. The quickest and the fastest, the best NHRA Championship drag racing has to offer. For Steve Evans, I'm Dave McClellan saying so long from Gainesville, Florida.
Casting Network.